may have heard that Governor Tim Pawlenty is going to be on Jon Stewart's Comedy Central program tomorrow night. And our folks over at Minnesota 2020 have been soliciting questions. What should we ask Governor Pawlenty? What should Jon Stewart ask Governor Pawlenty? And joining me now is John Van Hecke, and apparently there are a lot of people who have some ideas on what this should be. Right, John?
Yes, Mike. I tell you, we've had quite an earful over the course of the day. It's really been amazing. I mean, broadly speaking, I can break all of the responses down. Most of them have been substantive policy questions, addressing education, healthcare, economic development. I mean, the whole range. And then there are a few questions that basically can be categorized as, what are you thinking, Buster, and who do you think you are?
Okay. So where do you want to start? The substantive stuff, or do you want to jump to the weird things?
Well, we're a public policy think tank, so I say let's go right to the substantive stuff.
Okay, let's go to the substantive stuff. What is being asked of Governor Pawlenty? Substantial policy questions here that Jon Stewart should be bringing up.
Well, the one that everybody keeps coming back to over and over again is the tax question. Or more accurately, fiscal policy, because Governor Tim Pawlenty, in his 8 years as the governor of the state of Minnesota, has repeatedly refused to consider raising revenue. And what he has done by cutting funding to local units of government, to cities, to school districts, to counties, is he has forced property tax increases. So we've seen a real decline in state funding and an even larger growth in property taxes. And people have been jumping all over that. And, you know, this is from Dominic Ryan, who wrote in actually only about a couple of hours ago. Jon Stewart should ask Governor Pawlenty about how Minnesota now has a regressive tax system after 8 years of his leadership. I'd like to see him explain why and how he thinks it's fair that the middle class pays a higher rate of state and local taxes than the top 10% of Minnesota's highest taxpayers.
Now, to be fair, hasn't that always been the case? Has it always been the case that that top 10% has been paying less than the middle?
Well, yes, but we're great advocates of a progressive tax structure. And over the last 8 years, we've gone in a completely opposite direction. And the fiscal policy in Minnesota has become more regressive, not more progressive in the last 8 years. And this is something, I mean, I know a great many of your listeners are going to understand the fundamental concept that given the budget crises that we've experienced, Minnesota is not going to be in a position to be able to just tax its way out of this problem any more than it can cut its way out of its problem. It has to do both. And what we've seen, though, under Governor Pawlenty's leadership is we've seen a commitment to just cutting spending and forcing the revenue increases on the backs of property tax owners through cities, through counties, to school districts.
Okay, so that's the obvious question, Governor Tim Pawlenty. Why have you messed up the tax system, or why are you making it more regressive? What other questions do people have?
Well, here's my favorite one. I got to tell you, of all of them, this is from Bob McNeil. Who wins a race to the bottom, Minnesota or Mississippi? And Bob, if you're listening, obviously, it's important to understand that Mississippi has a head start in the race to the bottom. As they're at number 50, the only place that they can go is up, and Minnesota, unfortunately, is on the way down. And this gets to a question that Carol Daly had written to us. His researchers, meaning Mr. Stewart's researchers, must read the brilliant report by Minnesota 2020's Jeff Van Hecke, Minnesota's slip toward mediocrity, less investment, less return. And that's the real truth of the Pawlenty era and the Pawlenty leadership, is that Minnesota has declined relative to other states. We used to be a top 10 state, a top 15 state. Now we're in so many rankings: education, healthcare, transportation infrastructure, economic development, the lack of economic independence. The lack of it means that Minnesota, is sliding. And that's what Governor Pawlenty has done for Minnesota. And that's what I hope that, Jon Stewart, finds a way to put to him in his, inimitable fashion. It's explain the slide. Is this really, Governor, what you want to do in leading the country?
Okay, I have to ask, and maybe you're the wrong person to ask here, but why would a politician go on Comedy Central? Why would somebody subject themselves to that? I mean, this is not supposed to be a real news show. This is a comedy show, but people take this as news these days. Why?
Right. Well, I think it's brilliant. I think it's from a political standpoint, from a communication strategy standpoint. Governor Pawlenty, in terms of his national ID, he's the equivalent of Mississippi. He's at the bottom. He has nowhere else to go but up. And so going on the Daily Show only is going to increase his name ID. And essentially he has nothing to lose. I mean, they can throw pies in his face and he's going to come out better. But what it's going to do is it's going to completely duck the question of, what does he actually believe in as a political leader and how does he act on his agenda? And, here in Minnesota, we've got 8 years of a pretty clear track record about what the consequences of that. So, I hope that disconnect is something that the Daily Show staff and Jon Stewart focuses on, because, there's a lot of room here.
They certainly have a lot of room. There's a lot of things to go at. What else? What other questions here do we have? Because I know we've got a lot of people who would probably want to get questions in. So what are they asking?
Well, another big topic of discussion, of course, are the general assistance medical care cuts. The governor's desire to kick some of Minnesota's poorest and most vulnerable people off of the programs that Minnesota has created to help Minnesota. Just allow people to live in a hair more dignity and with just a hair more resources. And I don't exaggerate when I say hair. I mean, it's not a lot of money that these people are receiving from Minnesota from, less than 90,000 people. I've had several questions about that. The one that kind of jumps to mind, did you really think it would be a good idea to cut medical benefits which provide medications to Minnesota's mentally ill homeless folks now that they'll be on the streets without their meds for bipolar, depression, schizophrenia, OCD, anxiety, and other psychiatric disorders, which is going to put a greater draw on police and law enforcement resources.
Yeah, not to mention the hospital resources, everything costs more when you don't solve the problem up front. Okay, those are good policy questions.
Another one real quickly is addressing the persistent problem of unemployment in Minnesota and the fact that this governor has shown zero interest in actually creating jobs. We don't have an economic development policy in the state of Minnesota. We have kind of the stuff that we're holdover from the Ventura and Carlson administrations. The governor's only program that he's engaged has been, Job Z, which hasn't worked. I mean, and they've even stopped, meaning the governor's office, have even stopped talking about it. And so, we've had a couple of questions about that today. People get it. People understand, that Governor Pawlenty's policies have been a disaster for Minnesota. They're leading us away from prosperity, further into mediocrity, and it's not a path for the future. And Minnesotans are going to reject it.
All right. Well, let's jump down to maybe some of the ones that were maybe aimed at being barbs or a little less serious. Or what are people throwing out that isn't such a serious policy question? I mean, anybody asking him, Governor, boxers or briefs or anything like that?
No, actually, we haven't had a boxers or briefs question. I would say, given the governor's age, I'm going to bet he's a boxers man.
Okay.
Because he's I want to say he's 49, graduated from college in '83, so be about right. That was a boxers. Boxers came back in a big way. We also know from that era that the governor has traditionally been a big fan of the mullet.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I think, that would be a good topic of discussion. It's tricky for us here at Minnesota 2020 because we really do try to make it about the policy and not about,
not about the haircut.
And not about the haircut. Not about, does he look good in a Wild hockey jersey or not?
We could always ask him about, how do you say drop the puck? That would be, I guess, another one that would be in that area too.
For example, drop the puck. There was that controversy, and yes, the storied Pawlenty wit. And so the great bulk of our comments from readers today on our website is, really do focus on policy questions. I mean, I don't come back to that to try to sound boring or to try to sound, orthodox or holier than thou. They really are responsible comments. And the thing that, people can see is go to our website, www.mn2020.org, which if you're watching on Skype, you can see behind me. and read for yourself. It's on our it's located on our Hindsight blog. You'll see it on the main website. You can click on the link. Read through. We're at 60. I bet we'll probably be at 75, 80, which for us is a pretty big number. And these are not 1 sentence responses. These are paragraphs.
Now, we do happen to know somebody who has a connection whose brother-in-law knows somebody at the Jon Stewart Show. I'm not sure how this works, but we're going to try to send a copy of this video and maybe the question, so people should keep adding questions. We'll try to get this to the Jon Stewart Show, and maybe they can ask some of the questions that, frankly, the local press just doesn't seem to either ask or get answers on, and maybe Jon Stewart can.
I think that'd be cool. I have a cover letter if you'd like to send along with that.
Okay, a Dear John letter.
Yes.
All right. Well, we will.
Don't be seduced by the guy in the bad haircut and the big nose.
Well, John, thank you for joining us. Well, again, folks, go to Minnesota2020.org and you can add in your questions to add to the conversation. You guys, John, you guys do this every Tuesday, don't you? You have a good question up there for people to answer?
We do. It's a regular part of our engagement with our readership and our viewership, because, this is about moving Minnesota's public policy debate forward. And you got to listen to people and what they say.